Hey guys, Drifter here. Today I've got a multi-game commentary for you with some Call of Duty, some Battlefield, some Overwatch, and some movie clips and Carmageddon as well. We're talking about protesters, mostly the ones that block highways and streets, and if it's justified to run them over. You ever get stuck in traffic behind a bunch of protesters? They're really annoying, they're spouting things you don't like, they're maybe holding up an ambulance, and you just wanna... Yeah, well, if you do, you're not alone. A few days ago, I got into an argument on Twitter with Marksman and lots of other people. It started when Hutch was tweeting about the new bills that would either decriminalize accidentally running over protesters or some other ones that would remove civil penalties in some states. Marksman got on board and said that he was mostly okay with running them over. We argued for hours. He later said it was a joke. And what kind of got this going is hundreds of people came in and told me that it was totally okay to run over protesters. And my immediate reaction is, are you kidding me? Are you 5? Are you 13 and trying to be edgy? Are you just shitposting? But this went on for hours and hours and hours, and there were a lot of people that genuinely believed that it was morally justified and legally justified to run over protesters, while I disagreed, and I thought it'd make a great topic for a video. And in researching for this video, I found that the topic was much more interesting than I thought, so let's jump into it. We're going to be talking on a couple of areas today: legality, morality, and the reality of the act, and we're also going to include the issues of violent protesters that do try to break into cars and things like that. Today's video is going to have some very disturbing real-life clips, especially in the later half. When something bad is about to pop up, I'm going to show you the trigger warning lady. Keep an eye out for her if you don't like seeing gory things. But first topic, legally speaking, it is actually not legal to block a highway for a protest. I thought that it was legal because it was a type of assembly, and we have freedom of assembly because our Constitution and Bill of Rights, you know, this very important document we have in the US, guarantees us a right to protest and a right to assemble and a right to free speech and free press and all these sort of things. And the protections that it offers are very, very broad and very vague for a reason. Part of our culture in the United States is that we are a protest culture, that we value having an alternative opinion, and we value being able to say sometimes hurtful things to the government or to others. Our freedom of speech guarantees us that all ideas, even very ugly ones such as the Ku Klux Klan or Nazis, are permitted. They can have their own rallies, they can have their protests, they can freely gather in public, even if very few of us would agree with these ideas, and even if these ideas are dangerous, they are permitted because we have almost absolute freedom of speech. However, especially when it comes to right of assembly or to gather, there are some restrictions in place for public safety. The right to freedom of assembly does not guarantee you the right to assemble at any time, with any number of people, or at any place. Especially private places, private property owners can kick you out anytime at their will, but a public area has to be safe. Highways are obviously unsafe. It's currently illegal to walk down a highway. You can walk alongside of them, but not down a highway anyway, and pedestrians only have the right of way at crosswalks and at, officially marked stops and areas like that, so they're completely off limits. Now, it is actually possible to get a permit to block a major road or highway, or a permit to protest or gather in a public space that is typically off limits due to safety reasons. However, they're not often granted for highways, never, as a matter of fact, as far as I'm aware. So it is not legal and not constitutional to block a highway or a public road as a means of protest. It's considered civil disobedience, which is a non-legal form of protest, but culturally we tend to allow these things because we value our freedom of speech, our freedom of protest. It's just part of the culture of the United States. As long as these large gatherings are peaceful and not harmful or not immediately detrimental, the police and the powers that be tend to leave them alone. You don't have to take my word for it. You can go check the ACLU website, American Civil Liberties Union. They're pretty far left as far as American politics go, and they are the people that encourage and do lawsuits for a great number of protest and freedom of speech activities, so they know their law very, very well. You can see it's very clear that in almost every area you can't block streets, and they also, believe it or not, even though they're generally anti-police in the police shootings, They tell you to never argue with a street patrol officer. It doesn't do you any good. It just creates kind of a shit show. They're not going to argue with you about constitutional rights. Just save that for later for booking in court and all of that stuff. However, I do want to say that road protests in the United States are common. You've seen them more recently with Occupy Wall Street, or these guys that literally occupied Wall Street and screwed up all kinds of things. And even if you don't agree with them, there were other protests such as the Selma Civil Rights Marches, which you can see here with MLK and some of his other supporters, which were not viewed well at the time, and when they met with police, things got a little bit ugly, but for different reasons. All of this legality stuff aside, as a private citizen, you have no right to punish lawbreakers on your own. That's the duty of the police, of the government, of the powers that be. If you see somebody breaking the law and you decide to punish them yourself, that's vigilantism, kind of like Batman. Same kind of way you've seen a few stories about a person with a concealed carry shooting a mugger or robber at a convenience store. I think Walmart's a couple of these. They often get charged with some kind of manslaughter just because it was unnecessary. Speaking of which, running over a person is almost always considered vehicular manslaughter. You can get vehicular homicide, you can get negligent homicide. Negligent is the more likely one. You're almost certainly going to be arrested and charged with that. This applies even if they shouldn't have been in the road to begin with. Even if they are completely legally in the wrong, you will get negligent vehicular manslaughter if you run them over. And the legal logic behind that is the same kind of reason as like, well, that 5-year-old should have known better, so I just ran him over to make a point. It's not the 5-year-old's fault that he was in the road, and running them over doesn't help anything. And the same logic also won't apply to adults that should know better, and the same kind of reason to where if you see a person crossing the highway, you stop and let them cross, even if they're being a jackwagon, and even if it's not legal, everybody here knows that it's considered murder or at least manslaughter to run them over. And if all of these fatal accidents weren't punished, even for protesters and people that block daily commutes, then our daily commute to work might end up looking something like this.
Welcome to the death race.
Combined pedestrian fatalities with 10 points for an adult, double that for a child, and a whopping 50 points for the senior set.
So that's the legal background, but some people aren't super interested in the legality. Some of them are more interested in the morality of it and are interested in changing the laws to fit their own personal morals. So let's talk about morality, and the big one you want to say is that protesters can be violent. They can be dangerous, and the argument that I heard very often is, I will not let this group of protesters endanger my life or the life of my family or my children or anything like that, and when it comes down to it, I'm just going to run them all over. And this is something I actually agree with. It is true more times than it really should be in our country, and I just want to show you some video clips of some protests that got pretty violent and when the person was, in my opinion, justified in moving them out of the way by force.
Trying to get their own video of it, it seems like this is a moment where it seems like the police would intervene. And a scary moment for that woman.
Yeah, you're exactly right. This is what motorists are extremely frustrated. This hands-off approach by the police bureau leaves them hanging out to dry out here in situations like this.
No! If you fear for your life, you can go through.
Just explain one policy! Explain one fucking policy! You can't name one of his policies that you just is not gonna work!
You guys got my back?
Cars as well, kicking things, throwing things at cars, and then we watched one person in the crowd kicking in a door to a storefront. Back to the street here, a number of people in the street hitting those cars. They saw a number of people here tearing down an iron fence as well in front of a building. It looked like a motel complex. Once again, back to our live shot. All the protesters, as far as I can see from the helicopter, they're...
In this case, you are morally justified in harming the protesters or taking their lives in order to save and protect yourself and your well-being. And a moral decision is more of a personal one. You still may not legally legally be justified. You still may end up going to court for it, but in this case, you won't be dead. Me personally, I carry a subcompact Glock for such occasions, little 7-round, very small. I call him Mr. Blasty Jr., and to this day, I've only ever had to put my hand on it once. I hope I never have to again. And I do want to let you know that running over a crowd that mobs your car or moving people out of the way that have Molotovs and are throwing bricks and are inherently dangerous is completely different than just running over people like this.
Education, no deportation!
The next question when it comes to morality is, well, what about the ambulances? Or did you hear the story about the 5-year-old kid that died because the ambulance couldn't make it through the protesters? Well, that story, unfortunately, has not been verified. It has not been proven to be real. You can look it up on Snopes and some other websites. That is a real potential moral dilemma in that it could happen, but to the best of my ability to research, it has not happened yet. Most of the protesters have moved out of the way for ambulances. And also, if I'm not mistaken, that story came from Infowars.com, which is a website run by conspiracy theorist Alex Jones and has a lot of weird, like, white power and like neo-Nazi stuff kind of with it. I actually used to watch Alex Jones like way back in the day in high school, but then I realized how crazy he was, talking about like chemicals in the water that makes the frogs gay and the Illuminati and all this kind of strange stuff. So let's get back to the morality of the issue, and let's go take a look at the other side of the moral coin, which isn't outwardly looking, but what about peaceful protest? What about if you just don't like the protesters and their message and all these sort of things about them? You could say, well, they're regressive and they're dangerous. They're the regressive left, and the left has actually been the more aggressive component in the vast majority of the protests recently. I've seen the most violent protesters from the left side of the spectrum and being very regressive in that way. Using this justification to take their lives means that you believe that their ideas invalidate their right to live, or that their ideas cause them to be worth murdering in a sense, and I don't think that's going to hold up very well. There's the same logic of you should not be in the road to begin with, which we already talked about legally, and negligence does not absolve you of your responsibility. Their negligence of being in the road, them being stupid and them doing something ridiculous, does not absolve you of the responsibility of taking their lives. You can see the same kind of thing of they're causing a public nuisance, they're backing up traffic, they're in my way, they're inconvenient. And again, public nuisance is not justifiable manslaughter in no case, no matter how annoying somebody might be, no matter how big of a prank it is, no matter how big of a problem it causes. You being late to work or you being stuck in traffic or them being annoying doesn't justify taking their lives. None of these will hold up to an ethical, religious, or legal scrutiny, and they're all kind of bad ideas. Most of us would agree that the rules must apply equally to all. This is something very important to Western culture. We believe that the rules of living and conduct and, our laws of society, criminal law, civil law, all of that apply equally all the way from the president down to a homeless person, that your friends and family don't get special exceptions, rich people don't get special exceptions, minorities don't get special exceptions from the law, or majorities in either way, and that we all must agree to the rules equally. However, in this case, and in many cases, we are quick to want to make exceptions for those people that we don't like. You don't like Black Lives Matter. You don't like Occupy Wall Street protesters or anti-Trump protesters. They are the antithesis of everything that you believe and that you are against. So maybe it wouldn't be so bad if we bent or broke the rules a little bit just for this kind of bad group over here. And while this may seem like a good idea, it's actually a very dangerous idea, because when we get into the habit of bending the rules for people that we don't like, we set a precedent of doing so that the rules can always be bent. And in almost all of these cases, the party that makes the decision on if the rule bending was okay is going to be the party that's in power. So while it might be fine while your particular group is in power, if the pendulum ever swings the other way and there's some sort of revolution or just a change in public opinion, you could find yourself on the side of those people being made exception of. You might find that the rules don't apply to you and somebody might be taking your life with impunity, which is why we all agree to follow the same rules regardless of class, creed, age, and general general opinions about things. It just kind of protects us from citizen purges. Finally, if you just disagreed with every single thing that I've had to say here today about why we should not run over protesters, I want you to take just a second to look at the reality of what you're talking about. Wow, that was much more disturbing than the content I usually post on the channel, but I felt that it was justified. So again, at the end of the day, even if you want to run these people over, it's just plain wrong from every standpoint. And let's not encourage others to do it, because while it's fun to shitpost on Twitter and say that you want to and it's totally cool and that we should, and you might never do that, there is unfortunately a small percentage of people that will feel empowered or justified by your ideas and may well act out on them, so please be mindful of what you're saying. Guys, that is all for this video. I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. If you did, don't forget to like, favorite, and subscribe. Drifter out.